everybody. Thanks so much for coming and joining me to talk about kids and casual games. It's a really exciting marketplace, and I'm going to talk through some of the details about why you might find a really huge opportunity in leveraging casual game development skills into the children's market. So I want to start first with just grounding everybody here, especially those who are not parents, in what kids do today for entertainment and how they spend their time, because it's very relevant for why this is such a significant opportunity. So kids today spend over 7.5 hours watching and absorbing media every day. Over 7.5 hours a day, and that's on average, and this is children aged 2 to 12. Now, 29% of that time, they're doing other things. They're watching TV while they're texting, or they're listening to music while they're playing on a laptop, but it still remains in total 7.5 hours. 4.5 hours watching TV, and that actually hasn't changed in the last 10 years, but what has changed is the growth of listening to music. So pretty much single-handedly, iPods and other portable digital music devices have changed the ways that kids consume entertainment. Now, you'll notice they're spending 1.5 hours on average in a computer and 1 hour and 13 minutes with games. Now, what this meant in this particular survey, and this is going to be important anytime you're looking at how much time do people spend playing games, is, of course, which devices are they playing on. Some of the times that they're playing on computer, they're also playing games. They only spend about 38 minutes on average every day looking at print, including books. And they're spending about 25 minutes a day on average watching movies. Nope. There we go. So 1 hour and 32 minutes every day is spent by children watching, actively playing games. Most of the time, and these are 2009 statistics, most of the time they're on consoles. But another 23% of the time, they're on handhelds, or they're on computer, or they're on phones. Now, that profile has changed dramatically in the last few years, and later I'm going to talk about particularly the role of tablets and the iPad and how that's changed kids playing with games. So 1.5 hours gaming, and they only spend an average of a little less than 2 hours with physical activity. This is one of the reasons why parents are concerned about their kids' use of technology and kids in games. And it would be disingenuous for me not to bring that up, because there absolutely are barriers around how parents feel about their kids' engagement with technology. So 59% of parents agreed with the statement that kids don't know how to entertain themselves without technology or media. They also called them whippersnappers, which I thought was funny. At the same time, there are very different and conflicting views that parents have about their kids and technology. All of these stats behind me, you'll see, show that the majority of parents believe that computers and technology have important benefits for their kids, both in school and in their future careers. They believe that video games in particular, and I know it's kind of archaic language, but that's what they mean. I mean, games can help children develop skills for academic success. They also, 57% of parents, believe that computer games can help kids develop personal skills and people skills around cooperation and negotiation, not necessarily what you would expect. Why is it that parents, despite possible misgivings about technology, purchase and hand over games to their kids? Well, they report a number of things. Of course, it's safe and quiet, with the emphasis on quiet, busy and stimulated with the emphasis on busy. Immediate gratification, it fixes things right away. You can pick it up, put it down anytime. Games can obviously travel, and they can be enjoyed solo or with friends or with family. But the biggest reason that parents will say over and over that they let their children play with games, and this is children specifically 12 and under, is because they hope that their children will use technology to become lifelong learners. Parents believe that games offer an opportunity for their kids to learn to love learning, to have fun with learning. And in fact, they do have fun with learning. They also have tremendous results in terms of academic success, and there have been decades now of research of the use of games for students' success. In particular, there have been dramatic increases in basic skills in reading and math, up to 30% over kids who did not play those games. There also has been proven success in better recognizing complex information and pattern recognition. And it absolutely helps improve self-confidence, self-esteem, and even school attendance. Now, interestingly, when you ask kids, what games do you like to play? This is a multiple choice. And the #1 game that came to the top of the list, this is actually children 10 and younger, was educational games. They liked other games too, but they like educational games. They find them fun. This definitely changes as they get older. So if you're talking over 10, 12, well, certainly 15-year-olds, you're not going to be able to sell them on the primary reason is because you're going to learn something. But you actually can make a huge difference with an educational game in kids under the age of 10. Here's another way to look at that same information. These are statements that kids and parents were asked, kids were asked, what do you agree with? And their parents helped them answer because obviously they're quite young. The green bars show the benefits of gaming that children themselves feel as a result of playing. And this could be any kind of game. They believe it improves their cognitive skills. I'm sure those weren't the words they were using. It helps them learn new things. They can improve their motor skills, in fact, both gross and fine motor skills. They like the challenge of competition because they're starting to get to work with and cooperate and compete with others. And they like playing physically active games. They like the kinetic games. And this is, again, this survey was fielded in February of this year. So we don't have very much time here in terms of kids' exposure to physical gaming. So kids love games, and parents love games. And parents especially love educational games for their kids. Kids seem to like them too. These all sound like good things. How big is the market? Well, the market is substantial. And there's lots of ways that you can measure it. But the majority of parents believe that video games and other electronic media offer benefits for their children. And that's why, when we look at the information here, the blue bar is households without children. Ownership of a consumer electronic device in a household without children. The pink bar is ownership of electronics in a household with children. And just from the very first one, a video game console, households with children are more than twice as likely to own a console than those that don't have that. And they're equally passionate, you can see, about MP3 players. Across the board, for every consumer electronic purchase that you see referenced here, households with children outpurchase those without. Parents buy more technology, and they buy it because of their kids. Here's another view on this, and this summarizes research from M2 research, and it just shows the influence, the direct purchase, and the influence that children have over the purchase of hardware and software, specifically gaming hardware and software. So you'll see Xbox and Wii and PlayStation. What this doesn't cover, this $10.9 billion annually, what this doesn't cover are all of the games that are purchased through various iOS devices or through computer or through any number of other ways that kids can purchase games, including downloading them on, on a laptop or a desktop. So $10.9 billion, very, very large figure, obviously includes purchase influence, but does not necessarily include all of the other things that are purchased for kids. Earlier this year, Google estimated that the educational apps market, kids' educational apps market, is around $5 billion a year. So there are very large numbers involved with how much money is here, and it makes sense when you think back to the fact that 24% of the gamers in this country, and I am in everything talking about US specifically, 24% of gamers in the United States are under the age of 12, and they play a lot. So why educational games? Why not just fun, casual games that have no purpose other than to entertain? Well, it's important to realize that with education, Technology is never going to be the entire answer. And any of you who have worked with technology in education for people of any age know that technology is not a replacement for instruction. It never can be. It is to supplement the learning experience. And so just as in any kind of course or curriculum that you would be studying, you would have classes, several classes, and then in each class you might have several lessons. Similarly, you can take a multi-level and quite complex game, a multi-mechanic game, and break it down into small pieces. You're looking at bite-sized parts. You're trying to break down the experience into a single, for the most part, a single rich experience rather than a series of long, multiple experiences. There's absolutely a corollary there, and it's why casual games have more in common, casual and social games actually have more in common with kids' games than most people would think. So I want to delve into that a little bit more. What are some of the hallmarks of a casual game versus the hallmarks of a kid's game? So certainly familiar context and themes, time adaptable, easily reachable proficiency, clear rules and goals, and visually interactive. Now, those of you who are developers, and actually I would assume most of you know casual games very well, know that there's a lot of rules of casual games and you could debate them, but these are kind of bare bones. The interesting thing, though, is that they are very similar to the core tenets of developing games for kids, which is they have to have appropriate context-sensitive and content. They need to be immediately available. They need to be able to be immediately successful. There need to be really clear incentives. There have to be obvious goals, and it has to be visually engaging and highly interactive. These are the things you'll see across the board in all successful kids' games. So just to give some examples of what I mean, these are 3 different types of educational games. The first one to the left is Stack the States. Anybody played Stack the States? Okay, you don't have any kids in the 5th grade. Stack the States is one of the most popular games on the App Store. And it has been developed by Dan Russell Pinton, who is a single individual and independent developer. And it's highly successful and makes a lot of money. And it's a great game. And what Stack the States is essentially the states fall into place, somewhat like Tetris, but not quite, and you don't want them to topple over. If you hit the bar that you're supposed to, then you have to guess the state and the capital. It's very simple, but it's wildly fun, and in fact, it's so popular that you'll see it not only on the top 10 list, and it is a paid game, but also mentioned in parent blogs and mommy blogs. It is a recommended way for kids to learn their capitals and the states of the United States. That's an example of an educational game that's very overt. You have a lesson that you need to learn. You have something that is very specific that the child needs to understand, and so you build a game around it. Now, a second example of an educational game are all of the lemonade type games that you may have played or maybe even worked on. And they all have some very similar components in the addition and subtraction that's required just to play the game. That's a great mechanic. It's embedded learning. Kids are learning and they're getting better with the skills that are required to play the game in order to continue playing the game. It's part of the fun. It's part of the enjoyment. And then the third example of an educational game is incidental learning. And here I'm referencing a leapfrog game. It's a really fun game. It's called Sugar Bugs. And it sells for $7.50, and we have sold a lot of it. And the point of this game is you're using a toothbrush or various dental implements to clean up after the sugar bugs on your teeth. Now, it's very visual, very graphic, it's very, very funny and silly, but it also is probably the easiest and quickest way to teach your kid the importance of dental hygiene. And for a child of the right age, that kind of game is both fun and enormously educational. And no one is going to call the game, Dental Hygiene 101. It's never going to have an overt message about learning. Instead, it is taking you there taking you through an experience in order to impart some lessons. So what's special about kids and games versus, say, the way adults behave? What you'll see here are some unique patterns of behavior, not true for adults and not true for older kids. This is true for kids ages 2 to 12. How many hours a week do they spend gaming? Well, currently, they are spending the most amount of time on an Xbox. But this particular survey was only fielded last February. And notice iPod and iPad, an average of 6.3, 6.2 hours a week. Imagine, too, how long kids have actually had access to those devices and how much content has been built for them so far, which, relatively speaking, is not much. So what we're seeing here is a huge growth. The fact that, iPad and iPod even show up here is quite remarkable. How many games have they purchased in the last 3 months? So the bars here, the blue bar at the top, is for all kids 2 to 12. The red is for children 2 to 5. The green is for children 6 to 8. And then the purple, 9 to 12. So when you look here at how many games have been purchased in the last 3 months, say for a 9 to 12-year-old, what we see is that 39% have purchased 3 or more full games. That's an active buyer. If this was consumer research, typical consumer research, you would have just identified the core target of your market. And in fact, 9 to 12-year-olds are a pretty sweet spot for gaming. Now, asked how much they spent on the games in the last 3 months. So we know the number of games, but how many dollars? Now, here we see something that you're all very familiar with. The device platform absolutely sets the price barrier and sets how much money you can make. So when it's a physical game, what they really mean is it's a game for console. And that's why you'll see that 68% of children 2 to 12 report someone spending on their behalf more than $20. On the other hand, if it's a digital game, and you'll see that that's mostly Apple, you'll see that the majority of them aren't spending any money at all. And only 11% are spending more than $20. So what this is about is the challenges of monetization that are true for any kind of market, but they are especially true for children. And there are certainly ways to effectively monetize kids' games, but it's not by having a free version on the iPhone store or the App Store. So where are they buying their digital games? This is just confirmation of what you'd expect. Most of them are buying them through the App Store. One thing that is notable, though, is that when there have been app stores, device-specific app stores set up, that's where kids go to buy. They're not downloading anything off of other sites for the most part, with the exception of Disney and Nick. How about playing online? What are they doing there? Well, the blue bar here represents all adults. So generally speaking, people in the United States, adults in the United States who play games, 73% of them report that they do so online. Now, of course, 2 to 5, only 46% of them are playing online. You even have to wonder how a 3-year-old is playing online. But by the time they get to be 9 to 12, they have surpassed the patterns of adults in the general population. 76% of them are playing online. So imagine how quickly children grow and what that means in terms of media consumption patterns. So if we were to look at this information 3 years from now, we would see cohorts of children's ages off the charts in terms of online gameplay, both in the percentage that are doing it and the amount of time that they're spending on it. And they're already used to paying for games. Maybe not as much as we'd like, but they're certainly used to the fact that games cost money. They're not all free. So where do they go to play online? Well, by far, the majority are going to Disney.com. And that makes a lot of sense because Disney has invested a huge amount in building really great online communities for kids. That said, they still don't have the market cornered. The next second most popular destination for children under 12, 2 to 12, is Facebook, which tells you, again, a lot about what's happening with Facebook. And similarly, you'll see Big Fish, Addicting Games, Pogo, Yahoo Games, PopCap and MiniClip, Game House. These are all places you would expect to see someone playing casual games, except these are people under the age of 12. Now, I wanted to specifically talk about iPads for a minute. In a recent study that PBS did, PBS sponsored, 70% of parents with iPads report giving those iPads to their children to play with. They also report purchasing, on average, 8 apps for their iPad just for their child. 40% of their kids, of those same parents, 40% of those kids say that they play with that iPad at least once a day. And 90% of parents say that educational value is the #1 thing that they're looking for when they're considering purchasing an app. So themes coming back here. iPads are critically important. They've changed the way kids play. Parents are supporting this and they're spending money doing it. When they spend the money, they spend a fair amount, and they spend more and with greater ease when they know that it's for educational purposes. So let's say that you believe everything I've said, that the kids market is awesome, and that there's a lot of money in it, and that it's really large, and it's a growing opportunity, and that you can leverage the skills that you have with casual game development into the kids market. What else do you need to be successful? And like any specific target market or segment, there's always a lot to look at, but there are 4 things in particular that I want to make sure to familiarize you with in terms of children and games. The first is developmental milestones. So those of you who are parents absolutely know this. Probably every 6 months when your baby was first growing up, you noticed her doing things that she had never done before, or him doing things that he hadn't before. It's very important anytime you're developing to understand your target persona. And even though you may say a game is appropriate for ages 4 to 8, the fact is that there's a target age, and you have to know your target age. So I picked one. I picked a 6-year-old. What's unique about being 6? Well, the average 6-year-old has probably just learned how to tie her shoes. Just go back in time a little bit, see if you can regress and remember being 6. She is just starting to get steady increases in motor control, both fine and gross motor control, balance and speed and agility, and she's just now able to write in neat, smaller letters, not the huge letters, but now she can start to make them small so that a sentence can be created. Socially, she's very likely to want to only hang out with other girls. And if it's a boy, he's going to want to hang out only with other boys. And now, of course, there are kids who are exceptions to this, but this is in general true of children at this particular developmental stage. They are developing a sense of self-image and of otherness. So that idea of competition in games, that actually works for kids who are 6 because they finally understand that there are other people. And I actually want to be better at riding my bike than those people, or whatever it is that I'm doing. Cognitively, they're moving past simple nouns into really into broader and narrower nouns. So what once was a flower is now a daisy, or what once was a flower is now part of plants. They can count, they can write, they can read up to 100, they can detect patterns, and they can begin using hypotheses and observations that you would see in early science. At 6 years old, these are the kind of things that can be in a game and easily accessible to this child. But it's not only about developmental milestones, it's also about user experience and usability. And just like I'm sure you all think about with every game that you work on, universal design reigns. The kind of things that are important for grown-ups to be successful are also important for children. Things like the fewest clicks possible to success, having an obvious primary goal, kid-friendly language, and don't kid yourself on the average reading level of an adult. Short, simple audio and visual cues. So if you want, if a button needs to be depressed, having the button flash and saying, press the green button. These are the kind of things that are necessary. This is basic usability, except that it's critical for children because if they don't have this, they can't work around it. They don't have the skills yet. And you don't want them to fail because, well, then it's not fun. It's not fun to fail, which is why you should have a first-time mode, another just good usability practice. There should be device-specific affordances. It's different to develop for a desktop than it is to develop for iOS. No surprise, right? It's very important for kids. Think about the size of their fingers and their ability to move them and the kinds of things they can and can't touch, and the fact that they are constantly going to press that home button. If you have a child with an iPad, you'll notice that they will do that. Finally, kid test as much as possible. For Leapfrog, we, on average, do at least 3 rounds of kid testing for our games. And we learn something new every time. One hint to consider, and you could actually, I suppose, do this with adults, but when we bring kids into our kids lab, we show them a kind of neutral face all the way and then ranges to a super happy face. And we say, tell us about the toy that makes you feel like that. So we know the thing that they love the most. And then, what's your least favorite kind of food? And then we get the neutral. And then as we are asking them about things in the game, we ask them to relate to that, because that's how we can tell if they're having a good time. That's how we can tell if they love it. It's an example of just adapting a typical usability practice of a user review to the specific audience of a child. So the other thing that's important to know about developing games for kids is that you're actually developing for two. There's two personas. There is the parent, and the parent is going to care about the price and the promotions, and maybe that's even where you have to start thinking about parents will not spend more than X, or a parent will spend, say, $14.99 on a really awesome app that helps their kids understand and fall in love with astronomy. Who knows what I'm talking about? Star Walk? Anyone? Okay. That's an example of price aimed at a parent. The game title, the name of the game, it has to mean something to the parent. Distribution channels, wherever it's sold, it's got to be where the parent is, and that can be online or in a physical location. Licensed characters, it can't be something that, for example, parents hate. A lot of strong feelings about SpongeBob, for example. Cover art, key screenshots, and the first few minutes of play. You should assume that parents are looking at that and judging as to whether or not it's a good quality product. Now kids, they're going to care about the title, and they're going to care about where they see it, more so because if they've seen it, they'll ask their parent to purchase it. They're going to care about licensed characters. In fact, it might make them purchase the game. They certainly care about the cover art and the screenshots, but they also care about all of the gameplay and the reward system especially. That is absolutely for the kid. It really doesn't mean anything for the parents. And they also care about any type of social play. Now, social, I mean this not in the social gaming sense that we've been talking about today in many sessions and will continue to, but rather any kind of interaction, anything that allows a child to tell another child, I played this game, or to hear from another child, I played that game, or to compare their scores. So you have to think about social in a different way because it's unlikely that they're going to be meeting and playing games through a social network. The fourth, final, and kind of bummer issue are regulatory issues. There are regulatory issues that are unique to selling anything that is made for children. And these are specific to the United States, but there are also state-specific laws, and there are laws in every country around what you can and can't do for kids. Some things that are notable in the United States, you simply cannot advertise to children without identifying it actively as an ad. And the reason for that is because kids, especially kids under 12, don't know what an advertisement means. They can't separate that's real and that's not real. And so it is seen as unfair and deceptive to combine advertisements. Now, what would this mean for something in a game? It could mean that you have, say, 3 games in a series and you have trailers at the end of the first game for the next 2. Those trailers are considered an advertisement. Unless, of course, you don't say where to go to get them or that they cost anything, in which case they're not. It's tricky. A further issue here is that the group that monitors kids' advertising believes that video games are, again, their words actually, have greater potential to influence and confuse children. So they're more specific, and they watch games a lot more closely than they do other types of children's media. Clearly, you need to make clear what is and is not included in the purchase. So again, if you had an opening screen where you showed just the game and then you had placeholders for either extensions or other ways that you could add on to the game, that would be considered misleading. And finally, if you are reaching children through any kind of online activity, there are significant privacy rules for interacting with children. And finally, I know that there's a lot of interest, and understandably so, given the revenue growth, in in-app purchases. But in-app purchases that are targeting children, they're just unethical. And the FTC thinks so too. And that's why they're auditing the millions of Smurf berries that were sold to children and parents unwillingly. So why Leapfrog? Why are we here, and why do we care, and why are we interested in casual games? Well, we believe we have a lot to offer, and we need help. We want more developers creating games for kids, educational games for kids. And we're in, I think, a good position to understand how important that content is and what a big difference it makes. So since Leapfrog was founded, we have published, sold 95 million books, educational books, and 45 million games for kids, 45 million educational games for kids, 7.5 million videos. And we started with an educational mission. In 1995, Mike Woods was a dad who had a son who was having problems learning how to read. And he started Leapfrog, and that's where the LeapPad came from. And everything we do actually comes back to that. It comes back to, we believe that technology can make a difference in the way that developing kids learn. And specifically, I believe gaming has a tremendous role to play, and we are absolutely in our infancy with what we can do and how kids can grow and learn through games. So you may know Leapfrog because we have the #1 mobile learning system, and the #1 selling reading system, and the #1 electronic learning toy line, and we have almost half of the share of the electronic learning toy category here in the United States. But you may not realize, and this is partly because of how much we've done, that we have over 1,000 education and parenting awards, and we also have won the Educational Toy of the Year award 7 out of the last 11 years. But more than that, we actually are a company full of game developers. This may be something you really didn't know. People in Leapfrog have worked in many different studios, and they have worked on many, many different titles as producers, as designers, as artists, as developers. And we have published to, and members of our team have published to, every gaming platform that you can imagine. So we're passionate about games. We love games, and we believe that all of the talent that game developers have can be used for kids, for furthering their educational abilities, and frankly for growing the revenue of each of the developers' business. So large market, it's well aligned with casual game development. There are definitely revenue growth opportunities here, and we are actively interested in meeting with external developers and talking to people who are interested in partnering to grow and enter into this market. Thanks. Is there time for questions? Anybody have any questions? Yeah, because you're right, they're lying about their age. The question was about social networks for kids, and the issue really goes back to regulatory issues around privacy. And there have been a number of different types of networks set up, but it becomes so difficult, and it's confusing, and it's just not as fun. So I think that there really isn't an elegant solution yet for that. Other questions? Mm-hmm. Well, there's not a current solution for that that I can think of, but there are a lot of ways that you could work with that. I mean, there is old-fashioned email, and kids do have email addresses, so there's partly communication that way. There is in-game communication if you wanted to show a leaderboard, but then, of course, it's too big. So you do end up with that challenge. Now, there's a lot of development underway in terms of safe networks for kids. It's just that there isn't a good solution yet. There really isn't. Yeah. The LeapPad, it's launching, it's actually our pre-orders are sold out, but it's launching August 15th. It's a $99 tablet for kids. Yeah, that's a great question. We are pretty much a closed network only due to size and scale, not to desire. We'd like to have a more open third-party network, and we are also increasingly taking our content to other platforms. So our desire is to be platform agnostic. Uh-huh. Maybe not LeapPad because the device, but Leapfrog content on platform devices. Well, those of you who've made choices about developing for a console or for a portable, it's a just different game when it comes to expense. So we're looking for all of the ways we can make our content as broadly available as possible that is profitable. I mean, we're not a nonprofit, even though for many years it may have looked like that. Any other questions? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sure. Well, that's a great question, and actually you remind me of something important. One reason that we'd love to work with people who are interested in educational gaming for kids is because we have access to kids and parents. We have over 7 million connected devices and a network and an ecosystem that supports that. At the same time, because it's mostly kids' products, very seasonal, what ends up happening is that we invest most heavily in advertising in the fall. So we'll be doing TV and radio and a ton of online and a lot of other assorted advertising closer towards the holiday season. Anything else? Yeah. Mm-hmm. We are not. It's a really interesting market, and generally speaking, it's really difficult for companies who've served a younger kid's age to age up. And you'll see that if you think about your own, just your own experiences with Nickelodeon or with Disney or with any favorite kids brand. It's hard to go older. So it's an interesting market, though, and we definitely watch it, but we don't have any immediate plans. Anything else? Oh, yeah. Yes, and yes, and actually properties, I also oversee our IP development. We have internal IP development. We're always interested in taking a look at what other people have to offer. Anything else? No? Yeah. I missed the first part, the design of... Oh. Oh. No. I mean, we don't, not at all. And in fact, I would very much strongly posit that we have an untapped market, that we don't have enough content for the desire and the demand. And Angry Birds, well, it fills a certain entertainment need in the world, but that's not actually the one that we're after. That said, like I'm sure all of you, we look at the mechanic in Angry Birds and go, what should we learn about that? I mean, it's wildly successful. Kids like it. It certainly makes sense to take the best from what you see and try to figure out, well, how can we turn that into our own? But we don't think it affects the total amount spent. It's not like there is a single known wallet that people are taking from. It's that instead the market it's bigger than what we are tapping into. We collectively, not just Leapfrog. Anything else? Well, I'd love to talk to any of you who are more interested in this topic afterwards. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks.